You're done. Box up your things and be out of this building by noon. I don't care how long you've been here. My managing partner said it loud enough for the entire open floor to hear. 47 people. I counted them once during a fire drill. And right now, every single one of them was pretending to look at their screens while their ears were angled toward me like satellite dishes. I set my coffee down slowly. On what grounds? I asked. She crossed her arms and tilted her head the way people do when they've already decided the conversation is beneath them. Insubordination. Failure to meet billable hour targets. And frankly, attitude. She paused for effect. HR will send the formal notice. But I'd rather not make this a whole thing. Just go quietly. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I nodded. Understood, I said. And I meant it. Not because she had any power over me, but because I already knew exactly how the next 18 hours were going to play out, and I needed her to keep believing she'd won. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 32 years old, and the woman who just fired me in front of everyone I work with has no idea that she's been sitting in a chair I built, in an office I designed, inside a firm that exists entirely because of a check I wrote when I was 24 years old. But she was about to find out. I pulled my drafting pencils out of my desk drawer first. Then my personal sketchbook, the worn leather one with the broken spine. I took the framed photo of my younger brother off the corner of my monitor. I left everything else exactly where it was. As I walked toward the elevator, I passed my former mentor's office. The glass wall gave me a clean view inside. He was on the phone, leaning back in his chair. And when our eyes met, he looked away first. That told me everything I still needed to know. The elevator doors closed, and I exhaled slowly through my nose. 3 years ago, when I came back from my father's funeral in Portland, I found out my former mentor had quietly restructured the partnership agreement. He'd used the 2 weeks I was gone. The 2 weeks I specifically told him I needed to grieve and settle the estate, to file amended operating documents that diluted my founding equity from 41% down to 9%. He did it through a clause buried in the original agreement, one I had drafted myself and one I had never expected anyone to weaponize against me. I didn't say a word. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't send a single angry email. I opened a private folder on an encrypted drive and I started collecting. Every contract. Every amended filing. Every email where my former mentor referred to me as junior staff to clients who didn't know better. Every decision my managing partner made without consulting me, despite the language in the founding documents that required partner approval for any structural change over $100,000. For 18 months, I built the case. Quietly. Methodically. The way I was trained to build anything worth standing in. And then I waited for them to make the move that would give me the opening. Today, they made it. I didn't go home after I left the building. I drove to a co-working space 3 miles north, a place I'd been renting under a separate LLC for the past year. I had a second desk, a second laptop, and a second phone there. I sat down, opened the laptop, and sent one email. It went to 2 people. The first was a woman named Patricia Holt, a senior partner at the firm who had been brought in as an independent board observer 18 months ago, specifically to review partnership governance. I had recommended her appointment myself, quietly, through channels that made it look like the idea came from someone else. The second email went to my attorney. The subject line was 3 words: start the clock. By 8 that evening, I was back in my apartment reviewing documents I'd reviewed 100 times already. The unauthorized equity restructuring. The forged attendance records used to manufacture the billable hour deficiency. The client communications my managing partner had been sending under my name without my knowledge, setting up a paper trail that made me look negligent. My former mentor had been careful. But he hadn't been careful enough, because the one thing he forgot, the one thing he never bothered to check, was whether I still had administrative access to the firm's original document management system. I did. I'd set it up myself in the first year, and no one had ever revoked it, because no one other than me even knew it existed. The next morning, I was awake before 5. I put on the gray suit I'd had made in New York 2 winters ago. I knotted the tie slowly in front of the bathroom mirror. My younger brother used to tease me about how long I spent getting dressed. He'd stick his head in the doorway and say, "You're not going to war, man," and I'd tell him I was just being precise. He passed away 4 years ago. He was 27. He'd always been the one who believed in what I was building before I believed in it myself. I was going to war today. I think he would have understood. I walked into the lobby of Meridian Design Group at 8:53 in the morning, 7 minutes before the all-hands quarterly update that my managing partner scheduled every month like clockwork. The kind of meeting where everyone in the firm sits in the same room and she delivers performance numbers and project updates and tries to look indispensable. The receptionist at the front desk looked up and blinked. "Mr. Cole," I thought. "Good morning, I said, smiling at her. She'd worked the desk for 2 years and she'd always been kind to me. I made a note to recommend she get a raise once this was over. Is Patricia Holt here yet? She just went up. Conference room B. Perfect. Thank you. The elevator opened on the 4th floor just as my managing partner was walking toward the conference room with a coffee in each hand and her usual Monday energy, which meant she was moving fast and already looking at her phone. She heard my footsteps and looked up, and I watched her face go through 4 different expressions in about 2 seconds. Ethan. My name came out flat. You need to leave. Security is. I'd hold off on that call, said a voice from the doorway of conference room B. Patricia stepped out, reading glasses on, a leather portfolio in her hand. She looked at my managing partner, the way experienced attorneys look at someone who's about to make a mistake. Miss Reeves, Patricia said evenly. Before you take any further action, you should know that I've spent the past 14 hours reviewing the documents Mr. Cole provided to my office. And I need to speak with every senior partner in this building. Immediately. My managing partner's face went very still. What documents? She said. It wasn't quite a question. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and placed a single page on the table beside the door. It was a cover sheet, nothing more, but she recognized the firm's legal letterhead at the top and the word audit in large print below it. You'll get the full package shortly, I said. But I believe you have a meeting to run. She looked at me, she looked at Patricia. Then she looked at the cover sheet. She walked into the conference room without saying another word. I followed 2 steps behind. The room held 30 people. My former mentor was already seated at the far end of the table, and when he saw me walk in behind our managing partner, the blood left his face like someone had opened a drain. He started to stand. I shook my head once, barely a movement at all, and he sat back down. My managing partner stood at the head of the table. For a moment she just held her coffee and looked at the room. Patricia closed the door. I think, Patricia said, taking a position at the side of the room, that before we begin, everyone here should understand something about the founding structure of this firm. She opened her portfolio. Specifically, the terms of the original partnership agreement filed in this state 12 years ago, the one that established majority interest and founder rights, the one that was amended without proper authorization 3 years ago. The room was quiet in a way rooms only get when people sense that something irreversible is happening. I sat down in the nearest open chair. I wasn't performing calm. I actually was calm. I'd been waiting for this specific morning for 1.5 years, and there was nothing left to be anxious about. Patricia walked through it methodically. The founding documents. The original equity breakdown. The amendments filed during the 2 weeks I was in Portland burying my father. The procedural requirements that had been bypassed. The specific clause in the operating agreement. Clause 4.9, that required written consent from any partner holding 10% or more before structural changes could take effect. At the time the amendments were filed, I held 41%. No one had asked me. No one had told me. The signatures on the consent forms were mine, but I had never signed them. My former mentor's chair scraped against the floor. This is an internal. This is a legal matter, Patricia said, not unkindly but with a finality that closed the sentence. And I'd strongly recommend you let me finish. She finished. It took 11 minutes. When she was done, she turned to my managing partner. Miss Reeves, the termination filed yesterday morning is invalid under the terms of the original agreement, which Mr. Cole can invoke as founding majority holder pending the outcome of this review. Additionally, the documentation package includes evidence that your employment as managing partner was itself contingent on board ratification that never occurred. We'll need to discuss next steps with all parties present. My managing partner put her coffee down on the table. Very carefully. Like she was afraid if she let go too fast something would shatter. I want my attorney, she said quietly. That's your right, Patricia said. In the meantime, please refrain from accessing any firm accounts or client files. The meeting dissolved in the way that only rooms full of professionals can, everyone keeping their voices low and their movements measured while internally, every one of them was recalibrating everything they thought they knew about who actually ran this place. I stood up. I picked up my briefcase. I walked to the window that faced north, the one with the view of the river. I'd requested that this conference room have that window. I'd sketched the floor plan for this entire office myself when we were first looking at the space. I stood there and looked at the water for a moment. My former mentor appeared at my elbow. I knew it was him by the cologne he'd worn every day for the 12 years I'd known him. Ethan. His voice had aged about 10 years since I'd seen him 40 minutes ago. I need you to understand that what I did because I thought you were leaving. After your father died, you were gone for 2 weeks and you weren't returning calls, and I genuinely believed. You believed it was an opportunity, I said. I kept looking at the river. Don't rewrite it now. You saw a window and you took it. I understand that. I've understood it for a long time. He was quiet. The thing I couldn't understand, I said, was the performance reviews. The false billable records. That wasn't protecting the firm. That was building a case. That took effort. I finally turned to look at him. You were preparing to fire me for over a year. Before she even arrived. He had the decency not to deny it. The board is going to ask me what I want, I said. And I'm going to tell them the truth. I want the firm to survive. I want the clients protected. I want the staff to keep their jobs. I paused. What I don't want is to spend another day working in a building where I have to watch my back. He nodded slowly. His eyes were red at the corners. I'm sorry, he said. I know you are, I said. That part I believe. I walked to the door. Patricia was waiting in the hallway with a second attorney I recognized from her firm, a man who specialized in corporate restructuring. How are you holding up? She asked me. Ask me in about 4 hours, I said. She smiled. The board members are requesting an emergency session at 2 o'clock. Both of the independent seats. They've seen the preliminary package. Good. I looked back through the glass wall at the room we just left. My managing partner was on the phone, standing very still. My former mentor had not moved from where I'd left him by the window. Make sure HR is in the room. And whoever manages the client accounts. Already arranged. I went back to the co-working space and spent the next 3 hours going through the client files I'd flagged, the ones where my managing partner had been communicating on my behalf without my knowledge. I drafted a memo to each affected client. I would send those after the 2 o'clock session, once the legal ground was settled. Some of those relationships were over a decade old. They deserved transparency and they deserved it directly from me, not through a press release. At 1:45, I drove back to the firm. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. Old habit. I used to take the stairs every morning in the early years, when it was just 4 of us in a rented suite on the second floor and the elevator was always slow and we were all always running 5 minutes behind. A lot had changed. The core of what we built hadn't. The board session lasted 2.5 hours. Both independent board members had reviewed the full documentation package. Neither of them had much to say that wasn't already obvious from the materials. The votes were procedural, and they went the only way they could go given what was in front of everyone. My managing partner's appointment was formally rescinded pending a complete governance audit. My former mentor submitted his resignation before the session ended. He slid a sealed envelope across the table to Patricia and then he stood up and he left without looking at me again. I didn't try to stop him. He'd built something real in the early years. He'd also taken a sledgehammer to it when he thought no one was watching. Both of those things were true, and they were his to live with now. By 5 o'clock, I was back at my actual desk. The one I'd packed up 28 hours earlier. Someone had taken the tape off the box and put everything back. My drafting pencils were in the cup by the monitor. The framed photo of my brother was back in the corner. I sat down. I opened the project file I'd been working on before all of this started. A mixed-use development commission, community spaces, affordable housing units, a design I was genuinely proud of. I'd been thinking about it during the drive over. I had an idea for the southeast facade I wanted to sketch before I lost it. I picked up a pencil. 40 minutes later. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. No area code, just a string of digits that looked like it had been routed through something. It said, "You think you've won? This isn't over." I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down and went back to the sketch. I had a suspicion about where that message came from, and it wasn't my former mentor. He was already gone and he knew it. The message was theatrical. Desperate. It had the fingerprints of someone who still believed the story wasn't finished because they couldn't accept that they'd already lost. My managing partner had been at this firm for 14 months. In those 14 months, she had quietly built a network of loyalties among 3 of the junior partners, the kind of loyalties you build when you hint at promotions and preferential billing arrangements and carefully chosen dinner invitations. I knew about it because the same administrative access that had given me her email history had also given me a folder of calendar entries she'd been logging in a private subdirectory she thought was invisible. I'd already sent that folder to Patricia. The next morning, Patricia called me at 7:45. "She's resigned," Patricia said. "Effective immediately. Her attorney called this morning. They want a clean separation in exchange for no counterclaims." "What does her attorney think the counterclaims would be?" I asked. "Nothing viable," Patricia said. "But they want the language anyway. Tell them the firm won't pursue further action as long as she doesn't discuss client matters publicly and returns all firm property within 48 hours. I paused. "And tell her attorney to advise her to stop sending anonymous messages. It's not helping her position." There was a brief silence on the line. She confirmed it was her? Patricia asked. She will, if it comes to that, I said. But I'd rather it didn't. Patricia made a note of it. And the junior partners she was cultivating? I'm meeting with each of them individually this week. They followed the leadership they were given. That's not a fireable offense. What I want to understand is who among them actually shares the values this firm was built on and who is just positioning. I looked out the window. The morning light was flat and gray off the river. That's a conversation worth having. You're being very measured about all of this, Patricia said. There was something almost cautious in her voice. The firm didn't do anything wrong, I said. The people who run it did. Those aren't the same thing. After I hung up, I sat with that thought for a moment. It was something my brother used to say in a different context, about the town we grew up in. He'd say that a place isn't what the worst people in it do. It's what gets built in spite of them. He was 22 when he said that, and he was already smarter than I'll ever be. I spent the rest of that week in conversations I'd been putting off for over a year. With the associates who'd been quietly frustrated by decisions they hadn't understood. With the senior architect who'd been passed over for partnership twice and deserved to know the real reason why. With the office manager who had flagged a billing irregularity 8 months ago and been told to let it go. I didn't make speeches. I didn't talk about what I'd done or how I'd done it. I asked questions and I listened and I took notes and I remembered. On Friday afternoon, I called a brief all hands. Not a formal meeting, just everyone in the main studio space for 20 minutes. I stood in the middle of the room because there was no head of the table to stand at. I told them 3 things. First, the governance issues that had affected the firm were being resolved through a formal audit process and everyone would be kept informed at every stage. Second, the firm's client commitments were fully intact and no project was at risk. Third, that I had made mistakes over the past 3 years by being too quiet about things I should have addressed directly, and that was going to change. I didn't mention my former mentor by name. I didn't mention my managing partner. Someone in the back of the room started clapping. I didn't see who started it, but within 4 seconds the whole room had joined. I told them to get back to work. On my way back to my desk, one of the junior associates, a woman 2 years out of graduate school who joined the firm 6 months earlier, stopped me in the hallway. "Mr. Cole," she said. "I have a question and I'm not sure if it's appropriate." "Go ahead. Did you plan all of this?" Before any of it happened, I thought about it for a second. I planned the response. I said. What I didn't plan was needing one. I looked down the hallway toward my office. Design a building to withstand what might come, not what you hope won't. Same principle. She nodded slowly like she was filing that away. Good answer, she said, and walked back to her desk. 3 weeks later, the governance audit concluded. The findings were released internally, and a summary was sent to all active clients. 2 clients requested calls. I took both calls myself. Neither of them terminated their contracts. One of them, a developer we'd worked with for 7 years, said he appreciated the transparency and asked if we were planning to expand our team. I told him we were actively recruiting. That evening, I drove to the cemetery on the east side of the city where my brother is buried. I don't go on anniversaries or holidays. I go when something happens that I think he'd want to know about. I sat on the bench near the path and I told him the condensed version of the whole thing. The 18 months of collecting documents. The morning in the conference room. The text message from a blocked number. Patricia's call on Thursday morning. I told him about the junior associate in the hallway and what she'd asked me. The wind moved through the trees above the bench. It was a cold afternoon, mid-November, the kind of Chicago cold that doesn't apologize for itself. I told him that the firm was going to be okay. That I was going to make sure of it. That I was going to build it back into something he would have been proud to visit on a Saturday afternoon and ask me to give him the tour. He was the first person I ever showed my work to. The first person who told me it was worth something. Not because he understood architecture, he absolutely did not, but because he understood me well enough to know when I believed in something and when I was just going through motions. I believed in this. I drove back to the office. It was almost 7 and most of the lights on the floor were off, but 3 desks still had screens glowing. 2 associates working late on a deadline. One of the senior designers with headphones on and a site plan spread across his table. I went to my desk and opened the project file for the mixed-use development. The southeast facade sketch I'd been working on 2 days before any of this started. I picked up my pencil and I got back to work. Some people think revenge is loud. They think it's a confrontation, a speech, a moment where you get to say the thing you've been saving. And maybe for some people it is. For me, it looked like a piece of paper with a filing date, a folder on an encrypted drive. 18 months of getting up every morning and building something that couldn't be ignored. It looked like my name still on the door when everyone who tried to erase it was gone. The only sound in the office was the scratch of my pencil and the wind off the lake pressing against the glass. I was exactly where I belonged.